Have you ever noticed how the moment you stop trying, that's when someone suddenly starts paying attention? Not because you changed who you are, but because you finally stopped begging to be chosen. This isn't about manipulation. It's about energy. It's about what happens when you pull your worth back and let silence speak louder than effort. Most people think chasing love makes it come closer. But the truth, the harder you chase, the faster it runs. What if the real power was in pausing, in stepping back just enough to make someone feel your absence, not your desperation? By the end of this video, you'll understand why the moment you stop forcing connection is the exact moment she starts chasing it. Comment your location and let me know where you're watching from. Subscribe to the channel. Don't miss what changes everything. When we talk about stopping the chase, we're not talking about indifference or emotional withdrawal. And we're definitely not talking about manipulation. We're talking about a fundamental psychological principle that governs human desire. People value what feels autonomous, scarce, and self-directed. The moment you begin chasing, over-explaining, over-texting, or constantly seeking reassurance, you unintentionally communicate that your sense of worth is dependent on her response. That shift is subtle, but the human mind is incredibly sensitive to it. Attraction thrives in environments where curiosity can breathe, and curiosity dies when everything is available on demand. When you create space, you're not punishing her with silence. You're allowing her nervous system to notice the absence of your constant presence. And absence, when paired with emotional safety, activates reflection. She begins to think, to wonder, to replay conversations, to feel the gap you're no longer filling for her. From a psychological perspective, this is rooted in reactance theory. When people feel that something or someone is always available, there's no internal motivation to pursue it. But when access is reduced without hostility, the brain perceives a loss of autonomy and responds by increasing desire. Philosophically, this aligns with the idea that desire is born in tension, not certainty. When you stop chasing, you reintroduce tension, not anxiety-driven tension, but healthy emotional space. You're no longer trying to convince her of your value. You're allowing your presence, when it occurs, to actually matter. This also requires a shift inward. Creating space only works when it's authentic, when your life is genuinely full and anchored in purpose. If you pull back while internally waiting, watching, and obsessing, the energy doesn't change. But when you redirect that energy toward your own growth, goals, and self-respect, something fundamental shifts in how you show up. Your responses become calmer. Your tone becomes grounded. You're no longer rushing conversations toward outcomes, and that groundedness is felt. Humans are wired to attune to emotional stability, especially in romantic dynamics. What's important to understand is that this isn't a tactic to make someone anxious or insecure. It's an invitation for mutuality. By stepping back, you're signaling that connection is something you participate in, not something you chase at the cost of yourself. That signal forces a recalibration. She now has the space to choose, to invest, to move toward you rather than being pulled. And when someone moves toward you by choice, the emotional bond is stronger, more authentic, and more sustainable. The paradox is simple, but profound. When you stop trying to be chosen, you become someone worth choosing. And the moment you allow space, instead of pursuit, you give attraction the one thing it cannot survive without: freedom. When you shift from seeking approval to being selective, the entire dynamic changes at a foundational level. Approval seeking is rooted in fear, fear of loss, fear of rejection, fear of not being enough. And while it often looks like kindness or effort on the surface, psychologically, it communicates uncertainty about your own value. The human mind is highly perceptive to this. When someone feels they are being evaluated as the prize, they relax. When they feel they are doing the evaluating, they lean in. Selectivity quietly repositions you from someone auditioning for connection to someone who is consciously choosing it. From a psychological standpoint, people are drawn to those who have standards because standards imply self-knowledge. When you are selective, you're not closing yourself off. You're clarifying what you allow into your life. That clarity is stabilizing. It signals emotional maturity and self-trust. You're no longer trying to be liked at all costs. Instead, you're asking a more powerful question internally. Does this dynamic align with who I am and where I'm going? That internal question subtly shapes your behavior. You listen more than you perform. You respond rather than react, and that shift is felt even if it's never verbalized. Philosophically, selectivity is an act of self-respect. It's the understanding that your attention, time, and emotional energy are finite resources. When you give them away indiscriminately, they lose meaning. But when you offer them intentionally, they gain weight. This is why approval seeking backfires. It floods the interaction with effort before meaning has been established. Selectivity, on the other hand, allows meaning to build organically. It creates a sense of earned connection rather than forced closeness. There's also an important emotional regulation component here. When you're not seeking approval, you're less dependent on immediate feedback. A delayed text doesn't destabilize you. A moment of distance doesn't feel threatening. That emotional steadiness creates safety. And paradoxically, safety is what allows attraction to deepen. People are drawn to those who are emotionally self-contained, not emotionally withholding, but emotionally grounded. That grounded presence communicates confidence without arrogance and interest without neediness. What often goes unspoken is that selectivity invites reciprocity. When you're not over-giving, the other person has room to step forward. They begin to invest, to qualify themselves, to wonder where they stand. This isn't because you're playing a role, but because you've stopped removing all uncertainty for them. And uncertainty, when paired with respect, encourages engagement. It transforms the interaction from one-sided effort into mutual curiosity. At its core, this shift is about reclaiming agency. You stop asking, how do I make her like me? And start asking, is this connection worthy of my energy? That single internal pivot reshapes everything that follows. And the truth is simple. When you choose yourself first, you no longer need to be chosen. You become someone others naturally want to choose. Letting her invest emotionally before you do requires restraint, and restraint is one of the most misunderstood forms of power. Many people believe connection grows faster when emotions are revealed early and intensely, but psychology tells a different story. Emotional investment deepens through participation, not persuasion. When you rush to open up, overshare, or front-load vulnerability, you remove the natural process through which attachment forms. The mind values what it has contributed to. When she begins to ask questions, initiate conversations, and share pieces of herself, her emotional involvement increases because she is actively shaping the bond rather than passively receiving it. This is closely tied to the principle of effort justification. We assign greater value to things we've worked for, even when the effort is subtle. Emotional effort counts just as much as physical or logistical effort when she invests time, attention, curiosity, or vulnerability. Her mind begins to justify that investment by assigning meaning to you. This is not something you can force or accelerate without weakening it. Your role is to remain present and receptive, not ahead of the emotional curve. You listen. You respond thoughtfully. You allow space for her to move toward you at her own pace. Philosophically, this approach honors autonomy. You are not extracting emotion or pulling intimacy forward prematurely. You are allowing it to emerge naturally. This creates a dynamic rooted in choice rather than pressure. When someone feels free to invest, their investment is genuine. And genuine emotional investment carries weight. It creates attachment that is stable, not fragile. This is why patience is so important here. Impatience often masks insecurity. The fear that if you don't lock things in quickly, you'll lose them. But real connection doesn't need to be rushed. What's aligned will unfold without force. Emotionally grounded people don't rush intimacy because they trust their own worth. They don't fear silence or pauses in communication. They understand that attraction is not built by constant availability, but by meaningful presence. When you allow her to take the emotional lead at times, you're not disengaging, you're creating balance. That balance makes the interaction feel alive rather than lopsided. It gives her room to feel reflect, and desire rather than simply respond. There's also a deep respect communicated when you don't demand emotional labor up front. You're signaling that connection is something that grows through shared experience, not emotional extraction. This builds trust, and trust is the foundation on which emotional pursuit is built. When she feels safe to invest without being overwhelmed, she does so willingly. And that willingness is what transforms interest into pursuit. Ultimately, letting her invest first is not about withholding emotion. It's about pacing it. You're aligning your emotional expression with the level of connection that actually exists. That alignment creates authenticity, and authenticity is what sustains attraction over time. The truth is simple and often uncomfortable. When you stop rushing to prove how much you care, you allow space for her to discover how much she does.